Hi everyone, my name is Jason, and here is my tutorial on adding musicality to a song. This is really something that could be used for any type of genre of music, but I'm going to cover uh, this theoretical tutorial of using theoretical techniques in music theory, mathematical theory, and also lyricism, paying attention to the lyrics. I want to cover those three topics and show how they can be used to add quite a bit of musicality to a piece. In this remix here, which can be found at the link below, I took the song Skyline from You and What Army, and I used the bass line from it to construct a chord progression. So, starting out with the music theory of this tutorial, I want to show you the chord progression that was used by these different classical instruments. There's the piano, some classical violins, cellos, classical didgeridoo, and some upright basses. The piano, well, first of all, the bass line was exactly the same key and copied the bass line found right here in the chorus of the original Skyline song. So starting out with that bass line, I went ahead and built a piano chord progression over it, and so we can kind of check that out here. There's actually two of them that kind of got used. I'm just going to go ahead and solo out the piano right here. Things already soloed. And show you the main one that gets heard in the remix. So there's that piano sound there, and there's a very similar one here. Uses very similar notes right here. So, and that piano sound, by the way, is from the piano refills in Reason. I'm using Reason and Record here. Well, I want to go into the selection of those notes. If we look at the actual bass line from the original song, it actually is this bass line right here. It's going from E, D, G, A, F sharp, and back to E again. And this is the loop right here, over and over and over again, that was used. And that's the same bass line found in the chorus. Well, even though, let's look at this first chord here. I mean, we have an E in the bass, but when we go up to the piano part right here, we can see that we have the notes B, F sharp, and B again. These are all pretty much octaves as you go along, but then with some different note in the middle. Well, B and F sharp and B, don't really play as part of the to making up really what is just any kind of E chord that we would probably come across normally. There's not an E major, it's not an E minor. This F sharp throws it all off. This F sharp is like the second. Since we're kind of over an E chord down in the bass line, this feels like a second suspension, but we also have two Bs here. And with all these extra Bs, I mean, it really kind of increases the B-ness of this chord. It makes it almost not really want to be an E chord, even though E's down in the bass. So you could think of it as if the E was up here. This is kind of like a true B suspended chord. Well, so this sort of ambiguity of like the bass setting your ear up to expect one sort of chord, but then throwing another chord over that has some ambiguity to it, where, well, is this a B suspended, or is this an E, kind of suspended chord here? Which is it? That's kind of a cool feeling. It kind of keeps things a little bit ethereal. It also allows you to resolve it in sort of a different way. Where I kind of got this idea from was actually this prelude by Rachmaninoff. So if we kind of, you can just Google this or whatever, find it on YouTube. There's this part right around 2 minutes into the song here, where he's building up into this tempo 1 section. Well, this tempo 1 section here, we can see he uses these B's in the bass, and all the notes he uses to build on top of it are octaves with a couple notes in the middle. Here we have these two F sharps, and then another B, which is what's found on the bass, and then a C sharp. Well, this kind of creates the exact same type of ambiguity. Here it's kind of like we have, if you want to look at it from one direction, it's like a B chord that's suspended by this second, where C is acting as a second. Or you can say, well, even though there's a B in the bass, we really have all these F sharps everywhere. There's tons of F sharps. So the F sharpitude of this chord is kind of more like an F sharp suspended chord using the B as the fourth. And a fourth is like the most common way of suspending a chord. So our ear wants to almost hear it that way more. So it's kind of like we're hearing like an F sharp chord and a B chord kind of at the same time as the effect it has. Kind of has this ethereal, unresolved, not really anchored sort of sound to it. The way he ends up using this, though, is actually pretty ingenious. When we see, well, I'll just actually kind of play the section, but before I do that, I'll sort of explain. And I apologize to all those who aren't real music readers out there. It's hard to learn how to read music, but man, it's really kind of cool. It really helps you understand a lot of what's going on. So since he started out with kind of like two unresolved chords being played at the same time, at the end of this tempo 1 section, we get to this point where yeah, right here. So notice that at the end of it, right before this retard and this fermata, that kind of leads us back into the A section of the song. He builds up to this like D chord, which is kind of weird because it's not really in the key of B minor. Now we're in the key of B minor, even though it has two sharps, it's not D major. But this kind of all of a sudden brings us into the relative major, and then all of a sudden he lands us on this C major chord that's suspended right here by both the D and the F at the same time. And then when he plays a chord up here, it still has both those suspensions, but it has the C's on the outside of the octave. So we're definitely sure this is a C chord. Definitely C suspended in both ways at the same time, both with the second and the fourth. And then he lands here on just a pure C chord, not suspended at all, and it kind of comes back down, brings it on down to the A section again. But this is just brilliant because this chord is not even in the key, either of the keys that we're playing in, but it just has this bright sort of sense of like, first I'm making an agreement between the bass note and the primary notes that we see a lot of in these octaves here of being F or a C, but suspended, and then I'm further resolving it by making it just a pure C chord. Like he brings us like home and then extra home. So we're definitely back where we started from, because after all, that's like what music is so much about, is just setting up what home is to the listener's ear, leading them away from home and leading them back. Tension and release, whatever you want to call it. It's that same sort of idea. And so we can kind of create different shades of homeness or different ways of representing home musically, and then lead the audience away and back to it. It's just really kind of cool. So I'm gonna actually play these few seconds because it's not that long and it's pretty cool. So so starting around here, it sounds kind of like this. You get the gist. Just Rachmaninoff just has it going on. It's all about the Russians. Vote communist on your next election. It's just really the way to go. You can tell YouTube supports it. I mean, we got red going on here. The whole sidebars are red. Even propeller head. As you have a more intense note, it becomes its truer, fullest self with the velocity. It gets closer and closer to red. I mean, there's just hints everywhere that red's the way to go. Record red. Anyhow, seriously though, it's Russians kind of have a lot of what's going on. And as far as like performers go, I mean, they can all put a different spin on it. Here we have Victor. DJ Weisenberg is my favorite. He knows how to spin Rachmaninoff way better than anyone else I know. So actually, I don't know him, but anyhow, moving on. Regarding mathematical theory, I thought, well, hey, if I want to have this golden record right here with this remix, I gotta fit gold into whatever I can. So I kind of named gold instead of chorus or verse. All these blocks here are just gold, and there are 17 blocks of gold right here. 17 is a prime number. That's because we want prime loops as a prize for this. So anyhow, getting up to this, I figured, well, what other prime golden things can we use? I figured I'd go ahead and consult Wikipedia because it knows all. So we have the golden ratio. Fantastic. The golden ratio involves a few prime numbers right here. Look at this. 5 is prime, so is 2. And with this whole ratio thing, we get 1.6, 1.8, and so on for infinity. It's a fantastic thing. You guys should read this article. Well, you should at least look at this article, then scroll down before you close it, because then you get this really weird fraction thing, which is totally cool. Anyhow, I went ahead and used the golden ratio. I thought to myself, you know what? I bet that if I had tempos that were the golden ratio apart from each other, that'd make this thing golden. So I did. Here we start out at tempo in measure 1. We're at 86.526, and then we speed up to a tempo that is 140. Well, that ratio between those two tempos is the golden ratio. Furthermore, I figured, well, how about we have the duration of time where there is no tempo change, where it's stable in the beginning, and then there's this instability where you're changing tempos. Let's have that duration, those two durations, let's have that ratio also be the golden ratio. So I did that too. We start changing tempo right after beat 4 in measure 10, and we end right on measure 16. And if I did my math somewhat correctly, that becomes the golden ratio. So anywho, kind of pick some arbitrary things to try to like force into your song. and it kind of adds a constraint that adds to creativity. I think sometimes when we just look at a blank palette with every color available, it's really hard to be creative. So the one way of adding focus is just sort of picking an arbitrary something or other that we want to use. You can pick the word llama and spell it out musically and try to make a melody out of it or whatever you want to do. So the very last thing that I did to sort of increase the musicianship of this was, Dave's song had lyrics in it. Well, he made use of using some of those lyrics to affect the music in a few spots. Like when he says, "Don't hold your breath," that line is whispered, and all the rest of the music drops out so you can hear the whisper, and it's very breathy because it's just a whisper. And so that's kind of clever. That's like a very Sondheimy sort of thing, maybe, or any good musical theater person would do that, and maybe other like jazz artists too might do that same kind of thing. Occasionally we'll hear it in pop, but usually it's kind of the sort of high art styles of music, maybe where we'd find that most often. But why not? Let's put it in electronica too. Let's raise the bar, everyone. Let's just kind of make this like not just loops. So anyhow, throughout my remix here, there were times where I would take the lyric, or I'd pay attention to the lyric, and then I would add an effect or change the music so that way it kind of matched what the lyric was saying. For example, being on the edge of something, you're on the edge of the skyline. Well, if you're on the edge of something in real life, like the edge of a cliff, there's like nothing else out there. So kind of giving that feeling of space after the edge was something I thought would be kind of cool to do. So I made use of that. Anyhow, I don't want to play the remix here. I'll let you see the real thing in the other video for the submission and the SoundCloud link that I'll post below too. Anyhow, hope this helped give you some ideas on how you too can add more musicality to your songs and remixes. Hope you enjoyed.